they want to purchase it so that we're not going to get taxes on it anymore. I'm no longer interested in cooperating with the state. They want to buy property, that's on them. I'm not giving them any of my support anymore. They don't want to pay us taxes on it. Why should we want to entertain them to take it off of our tax rolls? That's insane. So we'll just simply gloss over that. There's no reason to respond to them. They're going to do what they want to do anyway.
How about number one there, this lady, Mrs. Kaufman,
She's looking to sell property to us or purchase it.
so
So this is a DeCarlo lot, correct?
I'm not for sure where it's
Oh,
at.
12th Avenue, no, that's not, but it would be all the way down a dead end and beyond that. Goes deep into the woods.
Yeah, she's got correspondence here from the Green Acres also, and they're looking at it, but
What's the size of that property? How many acres? That's another 5-acre tract, isn't it?
doesn't say in this correspondence. It just says lots 12 to 13. S-61 is the block.
I thought I saw that it came to a total of 5 acres for the two lots together. Yeah, so I mean, I don't really see why we need to intervene with what someone wants to do with the state. I'm not sure why I see the need for intervention from the city.
Well, the state's saying that in lieu of, and this is July 2nd, 2020, that they've expressed an interest, but they have limited state funding and they're continuing to evaluate the project. In the meantime, she called me and wanted to know what to do. I said, write a letter to the governing body and we will discuss it.
And the discussion is, why should it be our responsibility to intervene so that she can sell the property to the state?
Well, she's not asking to intervene. I think she's asking to sell it to us because the state hasn't responded.
Under the law, we have no right to be able to purchase any property unless we have a very specific use for it. We don't just simply buy land for speculation.
I agree, but
And it would also have to be done by ordinance, and would have to state the reason why we're buying it, and she wants to sell it because she can't develop it. What do you want me to do? There's a lot of land in town that people have.
okay, there's gonna be another correspondence shortly right after we discuss this. But when people call here and they ask me about wanting to sell property to the city, I'm not aware of what type of property. Maybe the city council is interesting, but it's my responsibility just to bring it to your attention.
I understand.
That's all I'm doing, just bring it to your attention. You tell me what to do.
Not faulting
because I
you.
should get back to this lady from Brooklyn, New York. You've been after doing something. with the
Council
property.
has decided we're taking no action.
No action, okay, that's all I
Is
think.
council okay with that? We're just simply taking no action. Is council okay with that? Everyone's muted?
Yes.
All right. Mr. Dilge, you're on mute.
What is the motion?
We're just simply not, there's no reason to take any action with someone who wants to sell property to the state, or if they want us to buy it. It's a barren piece of lot that's way off the beaten path. We have no right to purchase that property. You have to have a very specific use. You don't just simply buy land as land barons.
Based on what you said and what Judge said, it would be foolish for us to buy it or even consider buying it because it would result in us buying an awful lot of land we can't do anything with.
All right, so there's no reason to respond. We also had a,
Well, if the lady pays taxes, we have an obligation. I mean, and an ethical obligation to respond.
and I just advised Judd to simply tell her, council has no interest to purchase the property or get in the middle of you and the DEP. Period. That's it.
But thank you for thinking of us.
Yes.
Well, I'm sure he'll put a polite way of how we're not interested.
Okay, now, I added 3 more correspondence that just came in like today and went on like a few minutes before the meeting. I sent that out under correspondence to the council under Google Docs, and Mayor, I gave you a hard copy. This is simply information, general information that you need to know about.
Upper Township is one of them.
The first one's Upper Township. I haven't seen this in a long time, but they're doing some gypsy moth spraying by the state of New Jersey within their area, and they have to notify everybody surrounding them. And it looks like it's gonna be between May 3rd and June 3rd. It's just a point of information. The next one's from Marsh River Township, and they have an ordinance here, and they're talking about this cannabis business within its geographical boundaries. And so they're having an ordinance on it. I have a copy of the ordinance. I thought that it may be, probably most towns are opposing it, but, this is just a point of information. It's about 6 or 7 pages long. I did not send that to the council. So that's just a point of information.
Okay, that point of information, moving over to this other handwritten one here.
Yes.
Somebody wants to give land to us, is that correct, what I'm reading here?
Yes, this fella came, to me, on the telephone, and apparently his relative has passed away some time ago, and they're paying taxes on it. He didn't know what to do, and he seemed to be upset. He's an older gentleman, and he wanted to leave the land to Estell Manor, and I said, put something in writing, because we have a meeting April 7th, and I'll make sure it gets on the agenda so you guys can see it.
Okay, so my recommendation would be is tell him he's in fact, he can donate it to us, he'll have to pay for the deed preparation to us. And, we will accept the gift and he can write it off on his taxes.
Are you aware where that may be? Mayor, it's block 46, lot 24, which really doesn't have.
How about if I tell you guys this, there's something that I will never do, and that's carry these block numbers in my back pocket.
Right.
How the hell do I know these
Well, no, I
parcels
just
are?
didn't know if that was specific, like the Carlo lot or something.
No, I don't know where any of these lots are. Sometimes it's hard to keep up with your own property, you know?
Okay.
Was our instruction that we'd be happy to take the land, but he has to pay for the deed transfer? Or are we paying
Yes.
for the deed transfer?
He will pay for the deed transfer. And he can
Ooh,
write it off on his taxes.
you run the risk of jacking me up with that. I've given the city land and the city always paid for the deed transfer. They make me pay for it. That's, I think if the guy wants to give it to us, we should pay for the legal fee. You did in my case. Now I'm elected
I don't
official, I get
remember.
something nobody else gets.
Nelson, I don't remember your case, to be quite honest with you. I really don't. Who paid for what? All I know is you were willing to donate it. It got donated. I don't remember that you had to pay or we had to pay. I don't know why.
City paid it all. City paid it all.
The city paid it all.
Paid it all.
And what year was that again?
I don't know, it was a while ago.
First of all, we better see where it's at and what it's, you know.
Might have been 2005 or 2006. I gave you a 5-acre lot.
Chances are that was Rich Carlucci that did that. He was a solicitor back then, and it's probably why he didn't charge.
Stop that.
Because he's very reasonable with how he prepares things. So, all I can say is, you got a bargain. You got a bargain, and keep smiling with that, because you know what, we could change our mind and, charge you back taxes on, or back the interest on, not paying it.
Well, I'll tell you what.
Just joking with you now, keep it cool.
Yeah. All right.
I don't, listen. Randy, how much would it cost to prepare a deed?
It's
A
pro-
quick
I
clean
mean,
deed. Just
my
a quick clean
colleague, Mr. DeLucre is on here. He does real estate work. He can tell you what the cost is to prepare the deed and to pay the filing fees. Rick?
Yes, thanks, man. I mean, typically the deed, if you have the property description, the other information in hand, maybe a half hour's time there, and filing fees usually run you about a little bit over $100.
So it's probably somewhere around $250.
And what about a title search? We don't want to inherit somebody's land who may have $1 million worth of debt attached to it.
It's a different issue. That can run into several $100s.
Not saying that somebody's got that, but who knows? I mean, that could be part of, you know, if the man is deceased, he could have a outrageous hospital bill to pay. Who knows? And part of that could be attached to this property, and we ain't gonna know until we do a title search.
Well, it doesn't make you liable. It just creates a situation of a priority of a lien. What can make you liable is if there's environmental issues on the property.
And it's so hard to, I have no idea what this could possibly be. I just don't.
Maybe we should suggest to him that he give it to the Conservancy.
Once again, we're not gonna get the taxes on it. I mean, if the city owns it, at some point in time, somebody may be interested to purchase it from us, for whatever reasons why.
Well, then it has value to us.
So
Why don't we table it so we can research it some more?
I would agree. Let's table it. I make a motion to table.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
We all received a copy of some correspondence from Mr. Decker, who has requested to have this read into the record. Who would like to be able to read this into the record?
I'm sorry, where are we on the agenda?
We are in correspondence and we're about ready to get out of correspondence. So we have a letter that Mr. Decker, who is a resident of our community, has requested to have this read into the record. He is not very good with,
Talk about the guns for some.
nope. Nope.
There's another guy that gave us something too. I thought that's what you was talking about.
Nope. So, who would like to read that into the record?
Mayor, I'm gonna suggest that that's a bad idea.
The man asked to have this read into the record, and tell me why you think it's a
Well-
bad idea.
It's a bad idea for a couple of reasons. I think that the first half of the letter makes some very salient points about the man's experience with forestry management and what he's seen happen in Estell Manor and on the part of the state specifically. I think that the second half of the letter, where he goes on to disparage our residents, is something that we should never support and should never read out loud in a public meeting, especially one that's led by us. And to tell you the truth, you know, he references his own address in the footer is a portion of the city with which I am not greatly familiar. So I went and looked it up on through the tax office. And I hesitate to say this, but the tax office doesn't have any record of this particular person owning property in Estell Manor.
And I would advise council that in order to incorporate something into the record, either as an attachment or to be read into the record, requires a vote of the council.
I'm not gonna even entertain a vote because the vote's already been decided. I will say this. There's a person in Estell Manor who is the only person that ever seems to have to apply for a wood management plan to the governing body for a wood cutting permit. And that person is the person that's speaking right now, Joe Venezia. There's nobody else that ever has to come before the governing body except for me. The tax assessor has made it clear that the governing body's got no authority as to who's gonna grant farmland assessment or who's not. You could have 20, the exact number he said, you could have 12 city foresters. It's got no bearing effect as to who is going to grant the farmland assessment. That is strictly done by the tax assessor. And he has his code that he has to abide by and go with. So I have been more than just simply compliant, and council approved my wood cutting permit that night. And I think
Mayor.
it's ludicrous to have to be drug into mud over and over and over about something that I'm perfectly entitled to do, and I've been given approval to do.
Mayor, you're the only one that's been on council longer than I have, and there's never been a lumber permit before council in my time on council. I've never seen one, never heard of it.
The last time I saw one, Nelson, Gospel Truth, was back in 1995, the first year I came on.
And what are you talking about? How
I had to
How
make
is-
a reason, I had to
is
give a
council laying
full-blown,
you open if we haven't even heard anything like that?
I had to give a full-blown report about what I was doing on my property, not to mention the fact that I have to submit that to the Pinelands, to the DEP, to the state forester. Everybody is all on board
When?
with the plan that I do.
So
So
when?
back in 2018,
It's before my time. I'm sorry. That's
I'm
before,
just
I've never
simply
seen
telling
it.
you, I presented my plan to the governing body. Nobody else has to go through that. Nobody. There's been a number of farmland assessments that people have done, whether it's wood cutting, farming or whatever. They never made an application to the city. I'm the only one that has to deal with this nonsense. Just to
I
disparage my name.
never
more and
saw
more.
it. I'm sorry. I never saw it.
No, you haven't, Nelson, because you haven't been on the council long enough. And the next
Okay.
time I come around, I'm not gonna do it in front of the governing body because there's no law that says I'm supposed to. It's got nothing to do with the city council to approve it, other than the wood cutting permit.
There's no matter on the floor right now, Mayor.
It's very observant.
Did you get the permit?
Of course I did.
Okay.
Of course I did.
Okay, but, so you brought it before council and you got what you wanted, okay,
The council voted to give it to me, and they did,
okay, good.
right? It's as simple as that. Instead of having my name disparaged the day before Easter.
I'm sorry, so you're saying that council voted to give it to you? Did they have to vote for everybody to get a
They
permit?
only seem to do that with me. There's a number of wood cutting permits that have been going, that get approved year after year, and they don't go before the governing body. And I've been sitting here long enough that I can attest that that is true. It just doesn't happen.
I don't remember this.
Only me. There's a continuous form of harassment against me. And not by this council, by previous council.
Okay,
Okay, so
Moving
then,
along, I've
we're
said
running out of time,
moving
Mayor.
along.
Joe, that also came in tonight, Mayor.
Judge, holy crap, it's
I'm
like
just telling you that things.
Mayor, easy with him.
you're handing all this
Speaking
stuff,
to
and it's
him.
like, I'm trying to do the meeting, and you expect me to read all this?
Because it's correspondent, no, I'm not, I just wanna give you a point of information, because when someone says mayor and council, I have to give it to
Okay,
you.
moving along here, we'll do that at the next meeting that we're gonna have.
Mayor, please be easy when you speak to him.
Thank you for your point, Betsy. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Wonder how the tide would turn if all the, personal tax were leveled at someone else, how you guys would be able to handle it with ease.
The way you speak to him, it's abusive.
Stop it, just stop.
Okay.
Moving along here, we have an ordinance. Ordinance number 01/2021, adopting a revision and codification of city ordinances. This is the second reading, so something's a little incorrect here. Randy, don't you normally have to have the public hearing first, or no?
You do need to have the public hearing first.
Okay, so that's not on the agenda, but I make a motion to open a meeting to the public specifically and only for this purpose of the code update. Is there a second? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Anyone from the public who wants to speak about the code?
Mr. Pogue,
I don't see him on here. Go ahead. Now you just appeared.
Thank you. I want to lift up a general concern and a specific concern. The general concern, and I think this is mostly because of the unique circumstances that we're in because of the COVID pandemic, that there's a limit to how much information, specific information, is able to get out to the public. And obviously there's a long list of various changes that are being made here, and whether even for the most attentive people being able to know what all of those changes are and what effects they may have would be one concern. The specific one, though, does relate to the forestry ordinance. City has a forestry ordinance still in place. Has been in place for decades. Was felt that it was lauded all over. And it was a check and balance because farmland assessment on woodland property also provides a 90% tax reduction because the assessment is reduced by 90%. Therefore, the taxes are reduced by 90%.
Is that prescribed by the state or is that prescribed by the city?
Well, that part is prescribed by the state as far as the 90% tax reduction. The city has had an ordinance in place to provide a check and balance on that because, again, we are all flawed human beings. I might even go so far, since we just got through Easter, of saying we're all sinners and in need of grace. But none of us are perfect, and we are sometimes helped, even if we don't like it, and I will certainly.
Let's talk about the code update, Mr. Pope. Let's not talk
I'm-
about
I'm-
personal gripes of thinner.
I'm
Please,
I'm
move the
trying.
meeting along.
I'm trying
You're a
to.
very smart guy, the smartest guy that's ever walked into our building. Move it along in a very professional, smart way. Thank you.
I'm doing that, but and unfortunately,
This is not a debate.
unfortunately, it probably, well, you're the one engaging with me, Mr. Mayor, and you're the one, as you just stated,
Please move on to the code. Stick
as
to
you
the facts
just
of what you want to
stated,
point
you
out.
have a conflict here. You had a conflict last year at the last planning board meeting that we had before COVID, when you were insistent on making sure that the changes to the forestry ordinance were going to be
That is
included.
absolutely false, Mr. Poe. You are an absolute liar. You are an absolute liar. Just because it comes from your mouth, that's gold. You're an absolute liar. I have always said that I have a conflict.
And
You
Joe,
are
at that,
an absolute liar, and I'm still going to abstain from the vote tonight as it relates to the wood cutting permit. And by the way, for the record, Mr. Moore, I had no involvement with the code committee whatsoever, not with Jim Owen, not with anybody pertaining to what they did. I had no input whatsoever. It was
That's
their
correct.
decision to do it, not mine.
Joe,
So
Joe
you're
had
lying.
no involvement on this
and,
matter.
and notice what I said versus
Excuse
what
me,
he is.
Mr. Olson, what did you just say?
So much for the
Yeah.
public hearing part of this.
No, what did Mr. Olson just say?
Joe had no involvement on this part.
And I know, and I
Any
never,
other part.
and with all respect to Councilman Olson, I never said that he did.
You just said that I voted for it last year, and I didn't.
Oh, Joe, you don't listen to what is said. You're so concerned with defending everything else. I said that at that last planning board meeting, you lifted up the need to make sure that the forestry appeal was in there. You
That I
did,
was abstaining from.
Joe, you either abstain or you don't. Abstaining then means that you don't, the solicitor will tell you.
Twist the truth, Mr. Poe.
Um,
Twist it, that's what you're good at. Twist it. Manipulate it and twist it. But go ahead.
Mayor,
I've
take
had
a
enough,
deep
Nelson.
breath and stop the name calling. This isn't the place for it.
But
Take a
unfortunately,
second.
This is the place to disparage me and don't respond.
Take a second. Take a second.
I'm gonna take a walk outside. Go ahead. Talk what you like.
and unfortunately, that proves the point of concern, that there's information that's given that may be less than fully correct. And there's also the issue of of a violation of the ordinance. It can be stated that council voted to approve the permit. However, the permit was never issued. Why? Because the fees and escrows were never paid. And that's been the case since 2017. Now, if you're cutting wood in order to take receipts to the tax assessor, you're cutting. But that's what the ordinance has. When statements were made in the past that, oh, well, the state has looked at it and the state has said it was perfect, and I called the forester to find out, has anyone in town had an inspection? And I was told all those are sent to the assessor, and I asked the assessor, do you have any record of anything? No, he did not. That was after the last meeting, because I have been trying patiently to suggest that there's other ways to go here.
Mr. Poe, please take 60 seconds to wrap it up, okay?
I can do that. So I would
Thank you.
strongly suggest that you amend the recodification ordinance to reincorporate the current language. I believe that's section 4-4, but to go into section 357 of the new codification. But put the current ordinance in there, and it's there as a check and balance for everybody. And then you can proceed forward on that, and if it finds out that it is not needed as time goes on, then that can be changed as people consider it. But otherwise, unfortunately, as was just demonstrated, there's concerns. And if there is an ordinance violation or this possibility of one, rather than put the assessor and the code enforcement officer in the midst, the state police do have a unit for that, to where they can investigate those things. and council can make that referral and let that go from there. And I hope I finish at 59 seconds. I'm not sure. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Thank you.
If I may, Mr. Mayor, with us tonight is my colleague, Mr. Richard DeLucri, who has worked very closely with Mrs. Casagrande and with General Code on the formulation of what is before council tonight. I believe that Mr. DeLucri and Mrs. Casagrande can respond to I think Mr. Pogue's questions are about the forestry provisions in the proposed new code. And I think they're available to respond to those questions with council pleasure.
Okay, Randy, and then also when Mr. DeLucri is finished with his report, I think you have an email that you received from the tax assessor. I think you should actually read that into the record. It's a brief one. Just one paragraph. It shouldn't take no longer than 30 seconds.
Okay, Rick, why don't you explain what the changes are in the forestry provisions, if you would, please? You have to unmute though.
And this may take less than 30 seconds as well. In the forestry section, the substantive provisions basically were untouched. What changes is the requirement for a permit and, in effect, the separate enforcement authority of the town, of the city, to detect and pursue and prosecute if there were violations of the forestry ordinance. This, as Randy will talk about in a second, separate and apart from the farmland tax assessment issues. And, basically, you can be doing forestry, in theory at least, without also being someone who is eligible for, or who has asked for, a farmland assessment for your property. But the main issue, I think, in terms of the code and the code changes are that substantively, we haven't changed the provisions. Definitionally, what we define as forestry doesn't change and still matches up with the regulations of the Pinelands and the activities that you can conduct, and in terms of which you can conduct them, also basically unchanged. That's it.
Thank you, Mr. DeLucri.
Sure.
Not one word of the current ordinance is still
Mrs.
there.
Casgrant, I think you had quite a bit of involvement this year. Do you have anything to add in, or are you okay with what we have?
Well, I just want to say that Mr. O and I spent hours poring over documents and information from various sources, and we were very thorough in that. And what I'm hearing from Mr. Pogue is just it's an enforcement issue, not the code as written. And I talked with the tax assessor, I talked with the city clerk, I talked with everyone myself, and I don't disagree that enforcement is with the tax assessor is an important issue, and maybe it's something that council can look into, but that has nothing to do with the new provisions of the code. It's all based on law, I think, is what Mr. DeLucri is saying. It's all according to the new law, and laws have changed. So that's why we did what we did with that particular ordinance.
Is there anyone else from the public who wishes to speak pertaining to the ordinance?
Can I have one moment for rebuttal?
You've already had your.
May I have one moment for rebuttal,
no,
since I was interrupted for my
no,
entire
this is not
speech,
a
Joe?
debate. We're not in a debate with other residents. Sorry. Anyone else in the public? You've already had your opportunity, and a lot of them. Mr. Gazin.
You're muted, Larry.
Thank you, Mayor. Since I have Mrs. Casagrande and maybe Mr. DeLucri might have some sense of this as well, and I suppose this doesn't necessarily relate to law, but more as a planning and as a foresight issue for the city. As it relates to residential development in the city on our paper dirt roads, Mrs. Casagrande, I'm gonna ask maybe, and if you're not comfortable with giving me an answer to my question, I would accept that. But is your general understanding of the gist of our zoning ordinance is that there is no development in the city of any kind on any lot that is on an unimproved road? Meaning that there would be no placement